We are going to do a little presentation today. There's been so much stuff that's fulfilling prophecy that's happening in the news, just one thing right after another. And as Americans especially, it's easy for us to think nothing's happening because a lot of what's happening isn't happening here. And so, or at least we don't see it happening here. So I would like to take an opportunity. We're just going to walk through some things. We have a ton of YouTube video links. We're going to watch little clips of parts of some of them. We're just going to refer to others. The URLs are listed under the pictures for you so that you can watch any of those videos that you would like. We're going to breathe a prayer and hang on for the ride. Here we go. Recently, the Pope produced his October surprise, and it's called The Letter. We're going to give you just a couple clips of it. We're going to kind of skip through.
There's going to be some extra clicking here. We wanted to make sure we made it big enough for everyone to see.
So we're not going to go into all the volume of the video, which is off, which is a good thing. And he brings together 4 people's stories. One to represent the poor, one to represent the youth, one represents science, and one represents the indigenous people. So let's skip about halfway through the video, Ben. And it tells each of the people's stories. This is the indigenous man's part of his story. Halfway, Ben. Keep going, keep going, keep going. Okay, then these people get on planes wherever they are. The Pope sends them a personal invitation.
They're in Hawaii.
And
these two are.
Yeah, this is the science people. So let's go halfway again down to like 3/4. Okay. Then they arrive in Rome, and some of them are blown away by all of the construction and the traffic and the roads, and they've come from way out places or very poor places. And they have a personal audience with the Pope. So let's skip forward another. Okay. So the Pope meets with them. He speaks to them in Spanish. They give him gifts. This is a chief who represents the indigenous peoples. This is a small girl who represents the youth. And this is the scientist sitting next to.
It's interesting the Pope then talks about the Tower of Babel and compares that to the climate issues about how when they were building the tower, if a worker dropped a brick, they would be executed, but if a worker fell, they would just replace the worker. And he references that to being the same as climate. We're in such a hurry to build and to make things better.
To make money from everything.
Right, to make money. We're happy to replace the worker, to replace the slave, but we aren't replacing what we're taking out of the earth is his point.
Okay, so skip down another chunk. And he goes on, it becomes this very emotional video.
Also interesting, something that I didn't realize, but part of Laudato Si and part of where it was brought from was from Saint Francis of Assisi, which this guy here is a
actor representing
a scholar.
Oh yes.
They call him the Pope's preacher or something like that. Anyways, he talks about it, and then here in a little bit they actually he reads from this actual book written by Saint Francis, who was a mystic, and kind of quotes some of it, and it's kind of interesting because it's all talking about praise be to the Lord through the sun, through the moon, through the wind, through the air, through all, talking about all these things.
He calls it brother moon,
brother sun, sister moon, and stars, and then talks about through the air and everything else. And and just kind of brings it together about worshiping the earth. And then towards the end of the video here, this guy who's from Senegal supposedly receives messages at this time about a boat that sank with all these people on it, how a bunch of them died.
And he knew some of them.
And he knew some of them. They get into a pretty emotional experience about how we need to share the pain as a group. And everybody hugs it out and is obviously very unity driven.
So his whole point through this process, we are told in the Great Controversy that he is going to try to get all the world united, that all the world will wonder after the beast, etc. And we're told in the Great Controversy that the young, especially, are going to push for this worship of the earth, this Sunday for the earth, that will be stage 1 of the 4 stages of the Sunday laws. And the next video we're going to click on, we're just going to show you pictures. We're going to talk about it. We're not going to watch necessarily.
Just so that everyone's aware, this lady, where does she start talking?
You passed.
So this guy here, this gets up and talks, but it's in a different language and they don't translate. This lady here, who's actually a bishop, interestingly enough, reads their final declaration in conclusion of the meeting and goes through, I think there's like 34, 35, 36 points, I think.
So just for clarification, this is a video of the Pope in Kazakhstan. He went there to meet with all these different religions around the world to get some things in place. One of which is the document she's holding in her hand that Ben said has all those points in it. They all had to sign an agreement to participate in this process. Some of the things that stuck out to us about this were what, Ben?
Well, several things. It's an obvious the word is
unity.
It's all about unity. The entire document is talking about, she'll list a government entity and then she'll break down all the sub-organizations of that government entity in detail and then say that they're going to make spiritual unity and include spiritual things in their decision making. And so the whole document is about the government of these different countries recognizing the spiritual unity of this group
and the leadership of the Pope,
and including the spiritual things in government decisions. It's really, really pointed to that end. A few of the things that just kind of stuck out to me when I watched it was in one of the things she talks about how they agree on the fact that coercion should never be used for spiritual
or violence
doctrines, those types of things, which is interesting considering that coercion's definitely being used to try and push certain doctrines in the world spiritual picture anyways. And then also about how violence is always, we should not point the terrorists, the people that go above and beyond and are crazy about their things. There's a word for that, but I can't think of it anyway.
But those people, Ben, get glumped in the same spot as the fundamentalists.
Well, that's what I mean. The fundamentalists, their whole point was that we shouldn't say that they're just part of the spiritual group, that spiritual people don't want violence, that the violence is part of a special group of people that are going above and beyond and are crazy, but we shouldn't associate those with a spiritual entity. In other words, the Muslim religion should not be connected to terrorism because those are extremists that are doing that. And so there's a lot of that in there, a lot of talking about that, but for the most part, it's basically just them talking about how they're going to incorporate spiritual decision-making into their government decision-making.
That complies with Laudato Si, and the structure that the Pope has laid out.
So yeah.
And I could see...
The video's an hour and 16 minutes long. Her comments are probably 20 minutes, and then the Pope talks for another 20 minutes. Of course, he's speaking in Italian, and so they are translating it for you in English. It's kind of what you'd expect him to say if you listen to many of the other things that he said. It has a lot to do with about coming together and
unity.
A lot of those
fraternity.
Yeah, a lot of those words, they throw in there the fraternity word.
The thing that came to my mind was in the prophecies of Daniel and Revelation, and especially Revelation 17 and 18, when it describes the beast that forms and the whore who rides the beast. It's talking about how the kings of the earth will give their power to the beast. And as you watched all these religions and countries that were represented willingly signing off on these documents to do the Pope's bidding, it was very eye-opening. The other thing is, this entire structure is full of spiritualism. The symbols, the shape of the building, it's just phenomenal, all the spiritualism that is there. So, we're going to move on to the next slide.
The rest of the video is basically other people's comments and talking, other leaders. None of it's in English. They translate some of it here and there. There's some rabbis and some other church leaders that basically make the same comments.
And it's interesting that these two events are laying out a foundation for COP27, and we're going to now focus on that. Through the Elijah Interfaith Institute, they produced this document. It's called A Return to Sinai. So on Sunday, November 13th, which is interesting that it's on a Sunday and it's a 13th, which is a big Jesuit number thing, they're going to meet at Mount Sinai. And if we scroll on to the next page...
Real quick, the video we just watched there, that conference, was called the Interfaith Center for Sustainable Development. So that was the name of that conference that took place in Kazakhstan. Is it Kazakhstan?
It's close enough. Go ahead.
One of those over there. All right.
So between November 6th and 18th, the UN Climate Conference is going to take place on the Sinai Peninsula. And the religious communities and leaders have a key role to play in addressing climate change and climate justice, which requires deep transformation within society. It goes on to talk about how they need to bring about change in action, demands deeper changes in attitude in the heart. Let's go ahead and go to the next screen. So they're saying that to support this process, this weekend event will be held at Mount Sinai to stir hearts and transform. And it goes on to say that there's an interreligious climate of repentance ceremony where they're asking all of these people to participate in repenting for their damage against the climate and against our world. And then it says it's going to give them motivation for action emerges. And so we're going to move on to the next page.
And you'll notice.
Yeah, our common home.
You're going to see a lot of those buzzwords.
The Pope's buzzwords, the Laudato Si buzzwords, yes. Over the weekend, few official discussions or activities are planned. Provides a major moment when the attention of the media and participants can be turned to interreligious climate messaging and transformative vision. And then it goes on to say, the last sentence there, it is a site for turning to God and receiving his message. Let's back up. I shouldn't have skipped that. On Sunday, November 13th, Religious leaders will return to Mount Sinai, a mountain whose memory and meaning loom large as a place of revelation in the collective consciences of Christianity, Judaism, Islam, and others. And then the next page, read that for us, Ben.
Just so you know, this is all taken from a document that they put out and released.
Yeah, that's what the title was before we started.
It says that they're going to return to Sinai in a movement of repentance and quest. In other words, looking. They seek a new vision for humanity, its endangered existence, and they seek to receive and amplify a message of life-sustaining living and habits that humanity needs to hear today. In this spirit of receiving a message, the project partners will bring together the premier religious leaders from around the world's major religions to gather upon Mount Sinai to engage in a first ever climate repentance ceremony and to put forth a prophetic interreligious call to action. The Climate Justice 10 Universal Commandments.
Okay, so they're now looking for a different set of commandments. They want new revelation from God, and we're going to see that in some upcoming statements. So let's go ahead. So they're compiling the finest teachings of all the religions, and they're looking at the great prophetic figures associated with Mount Sinai. Who would that be? God, Jesus, Moses. Teachings and spiritual ideals will be highlighted and down to the blue sentence. The ceremony will draw from liturgies, readings, and musical traditions, lovely traditions, of diverse religions. The event will incorporate concrete examples of how religious communities are actively meeting the climate challenge and feature concrete initiatives. They're going to come away not with just ideas. An initiative means a plan to move forward that has consequences if you don't. So let's go ahead to the next screen.
Something else I find interesting here is communities with a concrete example of how they're actively meeting the climate challenge. As we're all aware, there's not a specific thing we can do to really affect climate, right? But one of the things that they have actively been doing in many countries, especially in Europe, that supposedly is meeting this climate challenge has been countries that have been adopting a day of rest for the earth. They've been moving into 4-day work weeks to try and give more rest during the weekend.
No Sundays.
No car and no carbon emission Sundays. There's been a lot of that type of stuff happening in Europe. So I can guarantee when they come in, these communities that are actively meeting the climate challenge are going to be coming in with these things. Giving the day of rest, those types of examples, giving the world rest on Sunday and so forth, which we know is part of the agenda from the Pope. But just to throw that out there, the only concrete examples are going to be those things that they're going to bring forth. So
and that they approve of.
The things that their concrete initiatives that they're going to come out of there with are going to be on that same exact track as well.
So this just basically lists out the goals, and I'm not going to go through all of that. You can read it. But it shows that politicians and civil bodies are mixing with the religious leaders. And that's your coalition that's being formed. Church and state.
Yeah, this church and state thing, they are pushing so hard to get these two back together. And it's all about getting the world onto the same page spiritually. It's all about that unity thing, all about falling under the same...
collaboration, fraternity.
Right, exactly. So this coalition of religious leaders, this Elijah board of world religious leaders...
are handpicked.
Yeah, they're handpicked, but it's also an intentional thing to show that there's a unity, to get everybody on board with the same thing.
And they've named it Returning to Sinai.
Right.
So let's go to the next page. This is the last page. This is how they're going to follow up. There's going to be a series of initiatives, which means something they have to go and do.
Educational initiatives.
Yeah. Social media will be employed heavily to disseminate the event in real time. So they're going to try to make sure this is put out to the world as a wonderful thing for everyone.
You know, one of the things in that video we watched a little bit ago about that discussion, that forum where all these world religious leaders came together, one of the things that the Pope talks about in there, he brings out, at the end of it, he brings out 3 words that he wanted to emphasize, 3 things that he wanted to emphasize about their meeting that they had. And one of those things was the youth, and how he heavily and really wants to, and is saying that the youth are the people that are going to carry us into the future. The youth are the people that are going to, continue on and whatever. And they talk over and over again, the same within the letter, that video, about how the world is going to continue on. There's no end to the world to these people. They don't believe the Bible when it says that it's all going to be destroyed. It's all about making sure that we take care of the world for our youth, so our youth have a better world to live in. And so this same thing with the social media, the youth are the people that really embody social media. Most of the older generations don't spend time on it, and if they do, it's usually through a youth helping them or showing them how to use it and all those kinds of things. So this is definitely youth oriented.
And we know, I'm trying to find it right now, but in the book of Isaiah, Jesus talks about how he plans to completely destroy the earth, because his plan is to destroy sin and everywhere that it's been, and then he's going to make it new. So that's God's plan, is that the earth will be destroyed and then it will be made new. But Satan's plan is he wants this earth to last as long as it can, because this is the only place he has that he can try to call a foundation for himself and for his kingdom.
So again, here, this is talking about who's coordinating it. We have the Elijah Interfaith Institute, which is putting it on, the Board of World Religious Leaders, which is another entity who's involved with that, the Interfaith Center for Sustainable Development, which is again that other forum that the Pope was involved in Kazakhstan. Yeah,
and we'll just skip the rest of this. You can read it. Now, this is a new article that was put out about this meeting. Before the people show up for their climate thing, there's already been a group sent, 2 groups actually, that met and chose the agenda, chose everything, and have everything in place. Just like when the Pope shows up in Kazakhstan, he has all these documents ready for people to sign. Well, they weren't drafted while he was there. And just like with this, there's a pre-agenda that's all set up and put in place. So we're going to scroll down from this first page of the article.
This little paragraph at the bottom. About a narrow strip of biblical land from the Red Sea to the Dead Sea is not only the pathway of the Israelites during the Exodus, but it is also the birthplace of our climate redemption.
So this tells you this is a big deal to them. It's a big plan.
And it's also a narrow strip of biblical land, which should tell you that it's going to be fairly focused on specific things. Obviously, it's not a broad strip of biblical land, so you can know kind of the direction that things are going to be headed here.
So this goes on, and it just brings out this author's viewpoint. He's a renewable energy innovator, and it goes on to talk about a group of us under the auspices of the Interfaith Center for Sustainable Development and the Elijah Interfaith Institute recently came together at Mount Sinai to envision what message of hope and transformation religions can offer to humanity as we grapple with the challenges of climate justice. And here's the part that makes your hair stand on end. One of the ideas was returning to the Ten Commandments given at Sinai. While not set in stone, who wrote the ones at Sinai, Ben?
A finger.
God's finger, and he did write them in stone. So then he says, here's my version with a little help from my friends. So he was included in that group of people. So we're going to scroll down. Like in Alcoholics Anonymous, the first commandment is to acknowledge with humility that we are partakers with a subservient to the Creator. Okay?
Partners.
Partners with. Okay. I missed that. He brings out that emissions are down 30% on Sabbath in Israel, which they would have taken the seventh day of the week off in Israel. But he goes on to say that globally everybody needs to take one day out in 7, and that can be observed by different faith communities in different ways. You know that doesn't work. If we got one group taking Monday off, we got another group taking Friday off, it's not going to work. So then it goes on, this is...
says, when religious leaders of all faiths ascend Mount Sinai, on November 13th, they will seek to touch the heart of humanity and deliver a prophetic message. And
look at the sentence that it began with. The rise of the ancient Egyptian dynasties coincided with the rise of the worship of Ra, the sun god. Why would he bring that up? A new era of renewables must shine out of Egypt this November, or our civilization, like that of the ancient Egyptians, will be doomed. Sinai power worked once before to fuel moral revolutions. Is that what Sinai did? It must work again. To keep global warming, we need a miracle. So scroll down to the next. All right. Something else that's going on at the same time while they're going to be in Sinai, and there is that in Israel, they've brought back their red heifers. If you just kind of run your mouse around that video, Ben, we don't need to play it. The red heifers have come back, which is part of Leviticus and the offering system that was supposed to take place.
Not sure what just happened to that.
We just lost a video. I don't know what that video was. So the third temple is a big deal for the Jewish people, and they want to build it back up a third time. They've been working on the parts and pieces and all of that.
The idea being that they're ushering in the new Messiah, the one that they believe is coming. And they believe the only way to accomplish that is by building the third temple, doing certain sacrifices with the red heifers and so on within that temple, and that if they follow that correctly, if they do everything the way that they believe is right, then they will usher in the Messiah.
And there's tons of mysticism that is involved now that was never involved back in Jesus' day. So click to the next page.
Ben Shapiro recently visited.
And this shows you that Israeli rabbi says he's already holding meetings with Messiah. And he's one of their biggest mystic rabbis and etc. So they believe Messiah already walks among them and that he will reveal himself. And your evangelical groups are all for this. They're all tied deeply into this temple being built. They've put tons of money and stuff into it. And it all ties back to some Jesuit teachings and theologies that have gotten mixed in with truth. So let's go to our next page. We wanted to talk just briefly about the signs in the earth and sky and sea. Matthew 24, Luke 21, Mark 13. All talk about the earth basically coming apart. And I've just put a teeny bit of videos in here that are fairly recent for you to see. I want you to swing down to the bottom right. This one is long, but this gentleman takes you around the globe and shows you all the different earthquakes that happen within like a 24 or 48 hour time period. And right now, all of our the seismic faults that run around our Earth are hyperactive. And we're getting solar blasts, and they're causing volcanic eruptions, and all kinds of stuff is happening associated with that. Let's go ahead and just go to the next page.
These videos here are done by
two preachers.
The two preachers.
Mm-hmm.
And they do quite a few of these videos, and they're fairly always updated.
Like every week.
Yeah, once a week, or every 2 weeks, whatever it is. They do a new video about different disasters happening around the world.
And then they show how they're able to share the Bible with some of different countries around the world and things that are happening. And
but
that's
definitely, these guys, their videos are full of a lot of stuff happening around the world.
Yeah, they try to keep up with it all. We have to apparently click through all the videos to go, this will be a long one. Financial collapse, power outages, famine in the land. These are all things that are talked about in Matthew 24, Luke 21, and Mark 13. And
the financial thing, it's interesting if you've paid attention, for a while now, we've seen different financial experts talking about the collapse. It's going to be worse than 2008, that it's going to be worse than this, that it's going to be as bad as the Great Depression.
Worse than the Great Depression.
But for a while they've been talking about this, and so a lot of people tend to kind of
block them out.
Yeah, it's just they've been talking about it for forever. Nothing's really happening. But if you really start to pay attention and you associate the financial issue with some of these other issues like power outages and like famines, you're starting to see a trend here. And that trend is that we're really quickly running out of resources, not just financial resources, but food, things in other countries that they really need. Transportation,
oil for heat.
Yeah, there's a lot of things very quickly drying up. What's going on between Russia and Ukraine and how that's affecting things all over the world. It's pretty insane, and you realize pretty quick that this has to be culminating into something here soon.
Not only that too, but you have the power outages are planned. South Africa for some time now has been having rolling power outages that'll last 2 hours at a time, and then a few hours later it happens again. And they're all, you can literally go on their electric website and you can see that it's laid out. And why all of a sudden does the electricity not last? It was fine 4 months ago. And so that and is just
too many things are kind of coincidental.
And they're coming all together at once. So wars and rumors of wars. All of you know that there's a war going on right now, and there's talk of nuclear war, and there's threats from China, threats from Russia, threats from Iran, threats. You know what I mean? And it's everywhere. And so these videos are there for you. You can take a look at any of them that you wish.
Unfortunately, our thought originally was that you guys would be able to click on these. Of course, we realized that when we recorded it as a video, you would not have that option. So, unfortunately, you're going to have to punch in the URL. But like YouTube works, you punch in the URL, it'll pull up one of these videos. And half of these other videos will probably be in the list of things underneath it that are similar. But definitely a lot of information here, and it's worth looking at. Let's see if we can get to that. Did I go too far? Okay, I think we're good there.
And then civil war and political unrest. Often we focus on only the United States because that's where we're from. And even now in the news, there's all this talk about the U.S. having civil war, that the poor are getting poorer and they're getting more desperate and they're starting to rise up. But if you look here, we have presentations from Haiti, Ethiopia, we have Myanmar, we have Sudan, Islamabad. These are all countries that are in major upheaval. We know that there's farmers that are protesting. There's just people going on strike. We have threats of strikes all over the United States. There's a quote here on this page from the book, it's manuscript 114. It was written in 1899. And we'd like to share that with you. Would you mind reading it, Ben?
It says, God does not design that men shall appropriate all that the earth produces for their own selfish purposes. He calls upon them to bring their tithes and offering into his storehouse, that there may be meat in his house. In India, China, Russia, and the cities of America, thousands of men and women are dying of starvation. The moneyed men, because they have the power, control the market. They purchase at low rates all they can obtain and then sell it at greatly increased prices. This means starvation to the poorer classes and will result in a civil war.
And interestingly enough, this was written in 1899. And look at the 3 countries besides America that are named. India. Are they having food problems in India? Yes. China. Are they having food problems? Russia. And it was interesting to me that all that time ago, and here it exactly lines up. We'll click through these videos. One of the things that is described in chapters 17 and 18 of Revelation is the beast that comes from the bottomless pit that the whore rides on. And the whore being a church that does everything other than what Christ would have done. And we just lost that URL.
Yeah, I'm not sure
What is going
why some
on?
of these are getting corrupted for something. I mean, the URL link will still work. It's just the video and
Okay.
isn't working.
We know that is a video about human trafficking that has disappeared. And we know that there is so much of that corruption going on all around the world, and especially in our country, in the United States. Children, women, even men are being sold into slavery by work or into the sex trade. And it is just horrifying to God. And He is going to hold them accountable. The Bible tells us that those children's angels see His face. And that it would be better for the people that abuse them to have a millstone thrown about their neck and be drowned than to go any further in their life to cause any more corruption or harm to those children. And Revelation 18 is listed here in the middle of the pictures. It talks about the merchants of the earth and how that whore that rides the beast, and lists all the things that they market with her. But look down at verse 13 at the very bottom, and it says, and slaves and the souls of men are things that are sold by that whore that rides the beast. We know that at some point the horns of that beast are going to turn. The kings that are part of that are going to turn and destroy her. But it will begin with a relationship they're benefiting from, but at some point they will turn on her. The video to your right is a phenomenal video that teaches the economics of what's going on with the banking system. And I thought that you might find it beneficial. Okay, this page has a lot of videos on it, but it has to do with worshiping the mark of the beast, worshiping the beast, and getting this mark under the pain of death and persecution.
On the Great Reset, I've been kind of surprised lately to see just how much this is talked about in very wide circles. You'll meet random people and they'll even be talking about this. Most people know who Schwab, what's his first name?
Klaus
Schwab. That's a name that surprisingly a lot of people know about. It seems like when you get to studying prophecy, and you get to studying current events and that kind of stuff, most of the people you talk to have no idea what you're talking about, which tends to result in them thinking you're a little bit nutty. But this has interestingly become something that so many people hear about. In mainstream news it's talked about, in social media it's talked about, but definitely a lot of people are starting to see this Great Reset thing more often.
But the main philosophy of the Great Reset is that you will own nothing and you will be happy. And what it is they will own everything and you will rent from them. They will determine how much money you have. They will determine how you can spend that money. And if you don't cooperate with them, they will take away that money. And eventually they will take care of you if you do not cooperate with what they're trying to produce. Let's go ahead and just click through. Yeah. AI and transhumanism. It is amazing what is being done now with computers and all of the technology that is involved in that process. They are doing things we can't even comprehend.
AI being artificial intelligence, for those who are not familiar with that term.
So these are 2 videos about AI and some of the realistic things that are involved in that. I could have filled this entire video up with links to videos about AI. You are welcome to process them. The biggest place we've seen it take place is in China. We've been watching how their faces are scanned, they have to behave a certain way, or they don't get points and they can't travel. And
AI is used to describe a lot of things, but in its essence, it's mostly described in that capacity, like in China. It is an artificial intelligence that does use all those camera feeds and puts together portfolios for every individual based on facial recognition and all that. It is an AI system that does that, but it's a broader thing than just that. It's talking about the technology that's involved. It's talking about how they have cameras on everything, about how they watch everything that you do.
Well, and they're putting things into people. Nanobots and little things that are so tiny that they can go in and do different things and control different things, and some of those things start out to be for good and then they don't turn out to be so good. So anyway, there's 2 videos there. You're welcome to do some research to find more. Climate change and the lockdowns that are coming and the Sunday law. We know that even the lovely CV word 19 isn't over yet. Because they're still talking about controls that are involved in that. If you work in the medical industry, you know what I'm talking about. People are still being pressured and pursued in those ways. So this has many videos that talk about climate change. They talk about the Sunday law. They talk about lockdowns, Sunday lockdowns, and all those kinds of things. One I want to draw your attention to is in the bottom left, especially. This is a wonderful presentation done by a neurological doctor who shows how the Sunday law isn't just one thing that happens one day. It's got 4 parts and pieces to it that progress over time. It's really a phenomenal presentation. Fourth Industrial Revolution. I didn't even know there was a third one. I was a school teacher for years. We always talked about the Industrial Revolution. Well, apparently the third Industrial Revolution was to bring in technology and computers and all of those things. The fourth Industrial Revolution has a whole nother agenda. I would encourage you to educate yourself about that process. There's 4 videos here that talk to you about blockchain, the fourth Industrial Revolution, all of those kinds of things.
You'll notice a few familiar faces that are very involved in the Great Reset and are also heavily involved in this fourth Industrial Revolution.
Yep.
The 2 of them are very closely connected, which you will find out if you watch any of these.
Revelation talks about the abomination of desolation and how we are supposed to watch for it. We're supposed to be ready to flee from it. And how that same whore that rides that beast that we were talking about in Revelation 17 and 18, that church that compromises all things according to how God has written them, will also produce cunningly devised fables that will confuse and eventually will be found out by all people and will be exposed. So those are more videos that you can watch about all those different discussions and things that are happening. This one is a little bit personal, but I wanted to include it in this presentation. I am a Seventh-day Adventist. Go ahead, Ben.
was just gonna say it's not personal as in just her or just I. If you are a Seventh-day Adventist out there, this is directly pertaining to you, and it's definitely something that you should watch. There's been a lot happening in the world, a lot happening in different denominations across the world. The Seventh-day Adventist Church has not been separated from that. There's been a lot happening in our church as well, and this is directly related to Seventh-day Adventism, but I would encourage everyone to watch it, as it definitely will help you kind of understand some of the things taking place.
There's been a huge compromise that came in with the mandates. And with those mandates, people lost personal rights, they lost spiritual rights. There was a lot of losses, and this video covers a lot of that very well. And he points out how there was a progression that took place as different churches and denominations denied their people the right to have the freedom of choice for their own body. And it is a phenomenal presentation. To the right, there's a quote, two quotes actually. Ben, you want to read those for us?
Let the watchmen on the walls of Zion not join with those who are making of non-effect the truth as it is in Christ. Let them not join the confederacy of infidelity, popery, and Protestantism in exalting tradition above Scripture, reason above revelation, and human talent above the divine influence and the vital power of godliness. And then at the bottom there's just a description of what a confederacy is, which is a union of men in a work that does not bear the stamp of pure, straightforward, unswerving integrity.
Okay. So that is our presentation for today. I hope that you will enjoy all of the resources that are available to you there, and that you will have a wonderful day.